à tous et à toutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I don't think it will be fully necessary to read out the procedure to avoid acoustic incidents word for word. In general, you need to keep a certain distance between yourselves and the mic. Please do not touch the stem of the mic. And if ever you decide not to use your earpiece, please place it on the round sticker in front of you. We now have the pleasure to welcome back our Minister of the Environment and Climate Change, who will be discussing the factors leading to the recent fires in Jasper National Park. It's great to have you with us once again, Minister. You have the floor. Thank you, Chair. It's always a pleasure to appear before this committee. Today, I'm accompanied by Andrew Campbell, Senior Vice President of Operations at Parks Canada, as well as Landon Shepherd, one of our expert firefighters at Parks Canada. I've had the pleasure of working with him in the past. If you have any questions, he is really the expert in the room. He's even an expert at the Canadian scale. Thank you for this opportunity to speak about C-76.
Traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe peoples. Last week, I brought forth a unanimous consent motion to expedite Bill C-76, and I want to thank all parties and members for their support. In the evening of July 22nd of this year, a lightning storm sparked 4 wildfires near the Jasper town site. By 10 p.m., an evacuation order had been issued for Jasper National Park. In just a few hours, more than 20,000 people have been safely evacuated without any casualties. As fires merged, a wall of fire nearly 300 meters wide set across the southern valley in which the town of Jasper is found, projecting fiery pine cones, snap treetops, and branches up to a kilometer ahead of the fire. Les pompiers de Parcs Canada,
firefighters from Parks Canada, Jasper, Alberta Wildfire, and dozens of towns across the country fought heroically to save homes, schools, and the hospital. But there was no stopping this fire, and no forest was going to escape its path.
The men and women who fought this unprecedented wildfire successfully protected 70% of the Jasper town site, on top of all the lives saved. And I would like to pause and for a moment and thank Mr. Shepherd and all of his colleagues at Parks Canada, as well as with other fighting forces, whether it's the city of Jasper, the province of Alberta, and other towns across the country, who made this possible. I cannot thank them enough. The courage and application of the collective efforts deployed in the first hours and days of the wildfire saved lives and the majority of the community. We remember especially the loss of Morgan Kitchen, the Alberta wildfire crew member who died in early August while fighting that fire. A sobering reminder of the risks our first responders face every day in their dedication to protecting the safety, lives, and property of others. Only through these efforts of Morgan and hundreds of others like him was any further loss of life prevented. This fire has had a profound impact on the lives of so many peoples. Impacts that are all too familiar to thousands of others in growing number of communities that have been affected by wildfire in this country. Des bâtiments et des infrastructures urbaines essentielles ont été endommagés.
Homes and infrastructure were damaged, and people's lives and businesses were changed forever. The full recovery of the community will take time, and Parks Canada is already working with the municipality of Jasper to ensure the sustainable reconstruction of the city.
Part of helping the reconstruction of a sustainable Jasper community. J'aimerais prendre un moment pour reconnaître les efforts de
I'd like to take a moment to recognize the collaborative efforts that have been put in place over the recent decades to prevent firefighters and mitigate the risks of them in Jasper and across the country.
And Indigenous partners have worked together for almost 30 years to reduce known wildfire risks in Jasper National Park and around the town, making it one of the most fires-prepared and resilient communities in Canada. Parks Canada has used prescribed fires for 4 decades, including 15 in the last 10 years at Jasper National Park, to reduce the risk of wildfire to national park communities and to enhance ecosystem functioning. Millions of dollars have been invested in the battle against pine beetle, removing fuel sources from built areas, and establishing a fire break around the town site. Fire Smart Canada's best practices have been implemented in Jasper National Park, and in fact, they've been largely inspired by the work that has been developed in Jasper. The Government of Canada has invested in Jasper National Park for wildfire risk reduction activities such as vegetation management to reduce wildfire risks to people, infrastructure, and assets. The total area treated in Jasper National Park since 2014 is approximately 1,700 hectares. However, devastating the fire was, Parks Canada response and preparedness ensured that it was not much worse. Notre gouvernement reconnaît la situation sur le terrain à Jasper.
Our government recognizes the situation on the ground at Jasper. Our thoughts are with all the people affected by the firefighters as well as the family of the firefighter Morgan. Families and businesses were forced to evacuate and face the loss of goods, loss of revenue sources, and for many, the loss of jobs.
That all those affected receive the services and benefits to which they are entitled. We're seeking to ensure barriers to the sustainable reconstruction of the Jasper community are removed. Dans le cadre de cet effort, nous travaillons.
As part of this effort, we are seeking to update the Canada National Parks Act to enable the transfer of land use planning and development authorities from Parks Canada to the municipality of Jasper. This change to the legislation will help facilitate streamlined decision-making where locally elected officials are empowered to make decisions regarding the reconstruction of their community. Parks Canada remains a committed partner in reconstruction. Parks Canada and the municipality of Jasper have a strong working relationship, and this was demonstrated time and again.
Structure with the municipality of Jasper was established on the first full day of the fire. This unified command has continued through re-entry and will remain in place as through the recovery and rebuilding. By working together, the results are being achieved. Residents were able to return to Jasper within a month of the evacuation. Roadways, the Miati Hot Springs, and the Columbia Ice Field were open within days of the fire in the town. And travelers are once again able to visit Jasper, and their presence is vital for the many tourism industry that cater to this clientele. Now, as the municipality of Jasper works to recover and rebuild, adoption of Bill C-76 will continue to ensure our government is supporting Jasperites. With the current streamlining work being done, and by implementing the right legislative authorities, local knowledge and local skills will be the leaders in addressing the needs of reconstruction in their community. Thank you. Merci. Heureux de prendre vos questions maintenant.
I will now be happy to take your questions. Thank you, Minister. I would like to welcome as well Mr. Soroka, Mr. Calkins, and Mr. Lloyd. All of these individuals are with us this afternoon. I'm told we will be starting with Mr. Soroka. You have 6 minutes, Mr. Soroka, 6 minutes.
Minister, this meeting is about the events that led to the fire. With nearly $1 billion in damage, 1/3 of Jasper destroyed, 800 housing units gone, leaving 2,000 residents homeless out of a population of 5,000, businesses reduced to ashes, upending lives and livelihoods. Yes or no, does the government accept responsibility for the failure to protect the people and the town of Jasper?
Merci pour la question. Peut-être que pour vous donner une idée de...
Thank you for that question. Perhaps I could give you a sense of what has been done over recent years. If you could look at the funding invested since the time when Stephen Harper was in power, $2 million were invested in 2014-2015 to prevent wildfires. Just to prevent forest fires in 2022-2023, it was $4.4 million. So this is double than what was spent under the previous government. But we did not stop there. Since 2020, $6.9 million were invested.
Okay.
No, that's not, we don't operate that way. So, I know some committees do that, but we're a little more freewheeling. Makes it
well, if it's
makes for a better
freewheeling, I
debate.
won't
But
ever
anyway,
get an
go ahead,
answer.
Minister.
Deux informations. Donc,
2 pieces of information to provide: $6.9 million just to address infestations and remove dead wood since 2020. $179 million since 2023. So we have invested at a rate almost triple that of the previous government.
You know, you have been quoted by saying years of preparation and forest management paid off. Yet a third of the town is gone. You know, $1 billion in devastation. 2,000 people are now homeless. So you're telling me this preparation is paying off. Minister, if this is an example of preparation and success, what does failure look like?
En fait, si on n'avait pas fait tout ce travail-là, et quand
Well, if we hadn't put in all of these efforts, and when I say we, this is Parks Canada, the City of Jasper, the Government of Alberta, and Indigenous peoples, if all of this work had not been done in order to create a protective zone around the city, the impacts would have been far worse. You must understand, Jasper is one of the cities best equipped to deal with something like this. I know the Conservative Party is an issue with this, but we are facing climate impacts like we have never dealt with before. Floods, tropical storms, and yes, fires. The chair will tell me when it's time for me to stop speaking.
Saying this Fire Smart is a national program inspired by Jasper, and this is what you've said. And I quote, "What we do around the country to protect the towns and cities was inspired largely by what we've been doing in Jasper." So I have to ask, if Jasper is the model for towns in proximity to forests, should we expect that a third of a town that is burnt to the ground? Is this the new national standard where only a third of a town burns and you consider this success? Is that your new plan?
Alors, effectivement, le programme Fire Smart est un programme.
Yes, the Fire Smart is a program used by municipalities throughout the country. What needs to be done is acknowledge the fact that we are dealing with natural disasters that we've never dealt with before. Take atmospheric rivers, for example, in the West Coast, heat waves, floods on the East Coast, and there will be others. We do need to do more to protect ourselves. I agree with you, with the member on that. Towns and cities located near fires may be affected by forest fires, but the Fire Smart program is used throughout the country, and it is something that we will continue to work on.
Your government first warned about the reality of a catastrophic fire in Jasper.
Peut-être que je peux tourner là. Maybe Landon, you were there on the ground. I could turn to you in terms of the sequence of event that led.
Of when Jasper will burn, not if it could burn, because you knew that there was a lot of fuel and everything, that the high potential of fires. When did you guys know this?
Avec vous, là, je vous ai démontré que notre gouvernement.
I have demonstrated to you already that what our government has done. Your government invested $2 million. Our government invested almost $80 million to prevent forest fires. $2 million, $80 million. That's the difference between you and us. And I understand that more needs to be done. I understand that. I'm the first to acknowledge that. When a notification went out, my team acted.
Yellowhead, Jim Iglinski brought forward on the floor of the House of Commons in 2017 to the Environment Minister then, said they take this serious issue very seriously. Then in 2018, Jasper Park Superintendent said Parks Canada takes this issue very seriously. Once again, nothing done. In 2018, two professional foresters wrote to the previous environmental minister saying this is not a matter of if, but when the town of Jasper will burn. Your government didn't even respond. Time and time again, you say you take this very seriously, how forests are going to be protected and towns are going to be protected, but yet no action. Does the government accept responsibility for the failure to protect the people in the town of Jasper? Yes or no?
Vous comprenez
Très brève réponse, s'il vous plaît, monsieur.
With a brief answer, Minister. We invested about 40 times as much as this Harper government in order to prevent forest fires in Jasper. Ms. Chattel. Thank you, Chair. Find that a little rich, hearing Conservatives talk about forest fires and how catastrophic they are. With climate change, and with the Conservatives proposing nothing to fight climate change, well, forest fires will continue to happen and cities and town will be burned. This has happened before and it will happen again. And that is why it's so important to have a climate plan. This is the result of inaction that you conservatives caused when you're in your years in power. Sorry, my colleague wants to know how the translation system works, and I am unable to help him. I'll stop the clock there. What are you looking for?
I never use it, so I don't know how it works.
Ah oui, c'est tout nouveau, là, je pense.
Oh, it's a brand new system. Yeah, they changed up the equipment and...
Come on, Dan, come on. Good, nice try, nice try. Ça va?
All good? Can you hear me in English? Perfect. Ms. Chattel, please continue. I just want to make sure that none of my time was deducted. Oh, good, perfect. Anyhow, I would be interested in hearing more about what happened on the ground. Mr. Shepherd, can you talk about the conditions before the fire? What would constitute normal conditions versus the conditions that we were seeing right before the fire started?
Thank you for the question. The conditions leading up to the ignitions on July 22nd were quite extreme. Drier, a longer period of dry weather than we had been experiencing for the last several years of when we have had quite extreme conditions. It was over 20 days of time since the last significant rain event recorded at any of our weather stations. And strictly speaking, it had moved into almost 99th percentile dry conditions for Jasper. So all fuels were available to burn under those conditions, and yeah.
Est-ce que vous pouvez m'expliquer qu'est-ce qui s'est passé?
Can you explain me what happened tangibly on the ground? So what did you and your colleagues do?
Yes, so when the first fire, the first of 4 fires were reported, it came from a member of the public, and it was near the TMX pumping station for the pipeline. The call came in because it was right beside the highway, and we actually had our fire duty officer was on scene within minutes of that report, and already within minutes of that report, that fire was already growing significantly and had moved into the tree canopy, which makes it very difficult to suppress. And we had a helicopter dispatched also within minutes that was able to start bucketing, and crews that were able to start work on that fire. And despite the fact that there's a highway and a railway sort of keeping the sides initially somewhat contained, the fire grew under quite strong winds to the point where the bucketing wasn't sufficient. Air tanker support was requested from Alberta, and they were not able to assist, and they desperately do want to assist. We work quite closely with Alberta Wildfire and BC Wildfire, and they weren't able to because they were very busy with wildfires, some fires that had lasted since last season. So really hard for them too, when they're asked for help, to not be able to provide that. But they combed the province, and the tanker groups were either already engaged in protecting communities, or they were smoked in and not able to lift off. And so my colleague in Edson, who I initially reached out to, he then petitioned BC to see if they had any tanker groups that could come assist. And they also were in a similar state. They had a tanker group in Castlegar that would have been able to fly towards the coast but could not come east towards us and assist. So that was unfortunate for that one fire. But while we were engaged with that fire and working to keep people safe on the highway, which is right beside where that fire started, we got reports of 2 other fires, and it turned out to be 3 other fires south of the community, about 30 kilometers south of the community. And so we continued to engage on the fire that was close to the community and affecting traffic, and work to both stop the flow of traffic, turn people around who were headed into harm's way, and also to try and secure that fire so that we would have passage along that road, and then get information on what was happening south. So because of how rapidly it was growing, the next obvious thing is there's campgrounds that are immediately north of that north fire, and we started evacuating those campgrounds when it became apparent we weren't going to stop the head of the fire, even
Thank
with
you.
having resources.
It pains me to cut you off because it's very interesting to see how things unfolded. But there's a 6-minute time limit. We'll go to Madame Posey.
Oui, en effet, c'est impressionnant tout ce que vous nous...
All of what you're saying is very impressive. You have boundless experience. But other people have experience too, and there are other experts. My colleague, Mr. Soroka, noted this earlier. The study by Mr. Hodge and Mr. Beijing was submitted to Parks Canada, more specifically the superintendent of Jasper National Park. I'm sure that there's a lot of expertise at Parks Canada, these people have 40 years of experience. They described a 30-30-30 day. That means that there was 30% humidity, 30 degrees Celsius, and 30-kilometer-an-hour winds. I believe this illustrates the fire dangers that were present. When the superintendent of Jasper National Park spoke about improving procedures, well, the superintendent had access to great expertise from the 2 researchers I have mentioned. Do you believe that the contributions and expertise from outside the federal government could be better integrated? I've noted this a few times, but the work being done, be it at Jasper, Banff, or throughout the country, is done in partnership. Here, take the example of Jasper. There have been 30 years of work to protect the city against forest fires. There was a protective zone set up in collaboration with the city of Jasper, the provincial government, and Indigenous communities. So we had a lot of expertise from outside. There's a lot of expertise at Parks Canada, but we also work with a number of partners in order to minimize risks. Of course, it is important to understand that it is impossible to completely root out forest fires in Canada. The same can be said for floods or heat waves. The best thing we can do is to prepare ourselves as much as possible. But what I understood from the experts I mentioned was that these individuals wanted to submit their research to Parks Canada management, but they didn't get a response from Parks Canada. And Parks Canada refused to present these researchers with a copy of their plan. As far as I can tell, there is a clear lack of collaboration between Parks Canada and people who have over 40 years of experience. But I want to take this elsewhere. The Alberta government drought map has Jasper under level 1, observation and surveillance. However, the federal government drought map describes abnormally dry conditions. How do you reconcile the data from the province and from the federal government? You did note that there were links between the federal government and municipalities, but how often do you update your maps? Alberta is saying, okay, we're on it, we're looking, we're monitoring, and the federal government is saying, whoa, things are abnormally dry. You will understand that the goal of the federal government is not to dictate what provinces do and force them to adopt our way of doing things. There's partnership, there's information sharing, there's cooperation, but we don't always have the same criteria as our provincial counterparts. Data analysis is not carried out in the same way necessarily. So we were more concerned about the situation than some governments. We heard from Mr. Shepherd that there were fairly extraordinary conditions. There had not been a lot of snow the winter before in the region where Jasper is located, low precipitation during the spring. So yes, there were conditions favorable to a forest fire. A protective zone had been created, of course, but you cannot change the weather. You cannot make it rain. But it looks like there's a lack of alignment between data from the provincial analysis and data from the federal analysis. How often do you update maps? Through the Canadian Council of Environment Ministers, we strive to sign federal, provincial, territorial agreements about climate change adaptation. We try to better exchange information, but also work together more effectively in order to ensure the Canadian public is better prepared for the impacts of climate change. With some jurisdiction, the work is further along than in other jurisdictions, but all provinces and territories and the federal government want to work together. It's only by working together that we will get things done. I have one final comment about your work and the possible lack of cooperation that we're seeing, as well as a possible lack of openness to expert advice. Mr. Hodge said that if we do not reduce the amount of dead material, then we would see a forest fire like in Waterton, the 2017 one. In that fire, destroyed 30% of a national park and took 2 weeks to put out. So I recognize that Parks Canada has specialists, and I recognize it is the case for all federal departments, but there are also experienced experts outside the federal government, and it looks like there is a lack of cooperation between the two parties, or a lack of an ability to share data. And with climate change, these situations will only become more frequent. You've gone over time.
Non, c'était même Madame Posé
No, even Ms. Posé noted that this was a comment and not a question.
Very much. Well, thank you for being here, Minister. And I have to say that when we heard about what was happening in Jasper, those of us in Alberta were heartbroken. I know for myself, I couldn't sleep that night. I actually texted my colleague who was the MP of that area that night. For many of us, Jasper holds an incredibly special place in our hearts. I was married in Jasper. In fact, I was in Jasper in May celebrating my 23rd wedding anniversary in one of the cabins that has now burned down. I think for so many of us, we taught our kids how to ski there. We learned how to camp there. We hike, we canoe, we cherish those Rocky Mountains probably more than anywhere else in our province. And so, for me, I'm glad that I get to be here and ask you some questions. And I would say that for Albertans, while this was happening, while this tragedy was unfolding, while we were watching and so worried about what was happening with our beloved Rocky Mountains and with the people who live there and work there, there was a lot of confusion about who was in charge, what was happening. There was a lot of blame going around. You know, Danielle Smith and the UCP were very clearly blaming the federal government. There was blame going both ways. And for Albertans, we didn't really have a clear view on what was happening, why it was happening the way that it was, and if everything had been done properly. You know, I'm aware that Premier Danielle Smith has cut the wildfire management budget by $30 million. I am aware that the NDP, that my colleague Richard Cannings has been asking for some time to have a national wildfire force. I guess from my perspective, Minister, what do you say to the people of Alberta who watched us lose a third of our cherished Jasper town site, and think about places like Lake Louise, think about places like Banff, think about other national parks? How do we know that the challenges that we saw in Jasper aren't going to be repeated in future in other beloved cities in our province or other beloved towns?
So, I mean, I was talking to the mayor of Jasper. I've been talking to him on a regular basis, but I was talking to him the day before. And at that point, the fire, it was some that had started, but it was under control. We thought, most people thought that we could manage it. And then winds started picking up. Like we went from winds that were about 30 kilometers an hour to winds that went between 120 and 150 kilometers an hour. I believe in the conditions change very rapidly. You talked about lives being impacted in Jasper. Mr. Shepherd, how many Parks Canada, or maybe Andrew, how many Parks Canada employee live in Jasper? How many of them have been affected?
Yeah, so we have 500 employees that live in Jasper and their families, and 200 have lost their homes.
So we care.
And accommodations. So
we care deeply. I mean, and they care deeply. We care deeply about what happens. I talked about a buffer zone of 1,700 hectares that has been created over the years around Jasper. I believe around Banff it's around 2,000 hectares. Because of climate change, we will have to reevaluate those and probably create larger buffer zones.
And the National Firefighting Force, perhaps.
You've heard the Prime Minister said that, we have Parks Canada, that is a federal forest fighting force, but could we do more? We've invested a lot since budget last year in more forest fighting capability federally. I spoke about the investment we've done specifically around Jasper in the last few years, north of close to $90 million.
Sorry, I do know that you've already given us some of those numbers, and so I don't want to make you repeat yourself. And I guess from people that are living in Alberta, what we're thinking is that is this going to be sufficient, considering that climate change means these are going to happen more and more regular, and are we going to be able to respond to them as fast as we need to? And I think most people would say that the budget happened in the spring, the forest fire happened in the summer, and it didn't seem to help the people of Jasper. So I would just reiterate that for you as well.
One
other question I just really quickly wanted to, just 1 second.
To climate change.
And I understand that. I'm not saying that we aren't going to have forest fires, but I do think that the response to those forest fires has to be stronger, to be honest. And I do think that the collaboration between the provincial government and the federal government was wanting, and those looking in saw confusion and fights. Whether that was just on
disagree.
The news is one thing, but that's what Albertans saw.
It's one thing for what Premier Smith said. If you talk to the forest fighters who were on the ground, there was, whether you're a Jasper forest fire, whether you're with the Alberta government, whether you're with Parks Canada, they worked like that. Mr. Shepherd, you could talk about that. But
the communications was not strong for those in Alberta. It was a very difficult time for many of us. One really quick question I want to get in before my time runs out. One of the challenges that we have is Jasper is a tourism city, of course. There's a lot of people who make their living off tourism. We know that for many of them, they were not able to have sufficient hours to access the EI system. This is a real challenge for workers that were, by no fault of their own, are no longer able to work. I've written with my colleague Blake Desjardins, we've written to your government, we've not received a response. Is there any chance, or is there any attempt being made to ensure that those people who have been affected by the fire in Jasper will be able to access EI because they didn't?
Very, very briefly, because we're at 6 minutes, so maybe 10, 15 seconds. Maybe we can answer that in another round.
I'm the Minister of Environment and Climate Change. I will certainly raise your point with Minister Boissonnault, who's responsible for
Thank you.
For
okay,
EI.
We'll go to our second round, the 5-minute round, and it's Mr. Lloyd who's leading it off.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Minister, for coming here. And I think the only thing I can agree with you on here is that there were brave and heroic firefighters that were fighting on the front lines. And once this fire started, I don't believe there was anything they could have done to have stopped it because of just the intensity of this fire. But you've come in here, Minister, with quite a lot of bravado. You've talked about the great job that your government's done, that Jasper is the most prepared town for a fire, and yet 1/3 of the town was allowed to burn down. Nearly $1 billion worth of damage. 2,000 people are homeless. Do you have any humility, Minister? Is there any admission that your government could have done more to prevent this fire from destroying 1/3 of the town? What could you have done, Minister?
It's quite ironic that your party, of all parties, would be talking about that when you oppose systematically every measure we put in place to fight climate change, or even to adapt.
Okay, just a second.
to
Just a
adapt to
second,
climate
Mr. Lloyd.
change.
We're not in question period here.
You oppose
Can we just
everything.
stop a second?
Yes.
Stop a second. Just pause for a second. Let's just calm down and have a meaningful exchange. So, where were we at? Were we at your answer or your question? I'm sorry. I was talking to Mr. Morris.
I'm here to listen to the Minister right now.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
I find it incredibly ironic that your party, of all the parties in the House of Commons, would be asking these questions when you oppose both measures to fight climate change and measures to adapt to climate change. Climate change is a reality. You may dispute
Your
this. Your party may
fail
not
to protect the town of
recognize
Jasper.
this, but it's real, and we won't prevent.
And you are not showing any humility. You're not giving Canadians
Well,
any
I'm sorry,
solace.
but this
Floodings.
is not
We
about
won't prevent
humility and
forest fires.
modesty, and we're not going to get into.
I'd like to move on to my next
Yeah,
question.
please
Thank you.
do. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Minister, in 2017 and in 2018, in multiple letters sent to your predecessor, Catherine McKenna, Minister at the time, Ken Hodges and Emil Began, who are forestry scientists, warned your government that Parks Canada was not capable of preventing this fire, that the actions that they had taken to date were not capable of preventing these forest fires. They said it was a matter of when, not if. Why did Parks Canada fail to take the actions necessary to prevent this devastating wildfire?
I respectfully disagree with the characterization of your question. Andrew, I'm wondering if you want to talk about, I've spoken about some of the things that Parks has done. Maybe you want to add a few things?
Yeah, so through the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Council, of course, Parks Canada gets a lot of support and uses a cross-Canada, government-wide, federal, provincial standard of how forest fires are fought, what the information that goes into that.
Sorry, Mr.
That
Chair, I'm going to have to
council-
cut this
that-
off.
Well, why?
It's going quite slowly.
Okay,
so.
well, go ahead with your next
Thank
question.
you.
It's your time.
In 2018, Minister, your own superintendent of parks, Alan Fair, went on CBC and said, quote, fire is not something that we're actually concerned about. He claims that your department did its homework to protect Jasper. Do you stand by the words of your superintendent? Was fire not a concern in Jasper National Park? Did you do your homework? Yes or no?
Since that interview, $86 million wasn't...
$6 million.
$86 million.
For Jasper National Park?
Yes. Some of it for Jasper, some of it for the other national parks
All across the
in
country.
Alberta.
Mr. Lloyd, excuse me, I'm going to stop the time.
Compared to the $2 million...
Excuse me. I like robust debate myself personally, and I have no problem with that. But please let the minister answer the question, so that we can find out the truth or an approximation of it. Go ahead.
So since that interview was done, $86 million was invested, compared to $2 million when you were in power. $2 million, $86 million.
That's false, Minister. But I will go on. In 2020, your government announced $6.9 million over 3 years for Jasper National Park. The Alberta Forest Products Association, in an open letter in 2017, said it would take $85 million to protect the park. And yet your government only invested $6.9 million over 3 years. The proof is in the pudding. A third of the town of Jasper burned down, and you're here to this committee bragging about a $6 million investment? It's not nearly enough, Minister.
En fait, vous faites erreur, c'est 6,9.
You are wrong. It was 6.9 million for pine beetle infestation, but it was 79 million total. So it's wrong to say it was just 6 million. We added 79 million after that.
Why was thousands of hectares of dead pine beetle-infested trees allowed to be in close proximity to the town of Jasper? Thousands of hectares. Your government says that you've removed 1,700 hectares since 2014. Well, in a 2022 report, your own department said that they only removed 1.6 hectares of white park pine. Like, there are thousands of hectares of dead pine beetle trees in the vicinity of Jasper. Why were these allowed to stay there when they represented a serious threat to the town? All these experts knew it. Why didn't you remove them?
So through the 1,700 hectares that were removed, so about 17 square kilometers, which is about 8 times the size of the town of Jasper, just to put it in perspective for
In
people.
a 1 million square hectare
was
park.
Correct, but with a lot of that park not being the town. We can all agree to that, I'm
Yes.
sure. So within that, you had a large buffer zone and a buffer zone, and on top of that, and, you know, Landon is the vegetation and fire specialist out of Banff.
How much time
On
do I have
top
left,
of,
Chair?
on top of that, we have a whole series of ramp types of, you know, there's a large, and I don't want to just call it a sprinkler system, but a high-powered sprinkler system that protects the town, that goes up, you know, 12 meters in height, that protects a large area of the town.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to
All of
cut it off
those
here.
types
We're way
of-
over time. We're way over time. But anyway, it's very complex, I know.
Thank you for your professionalism, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Longfield.
Thank you, Chair, and really thank you to Parks Canada for being here, and Mr. Shepherd for incredible work that you've done on behalf of Canada. Minister, I want to talk just briefly, if you could describe the governance around this issue. You mentioned adaptation. Forest fires are increasing. Climate change is going to continue that trajectory for decades while we fight the crisis that we're in with climate change. I've heard in the House, you know, the increased cost on pollution that we're putting in place to try to bend the curve on climate change didn't stop the forest fires. Could you talk about the governance that we're putting in place, the trajectory that we're trying to change, and how we're working with firefighters, with national parks, with provincial counterparts, municipal counterparts? It's hard to paint that picture in a few minutes, but if you could start on that, then I'd like to just go over to Mr. Shepherd about some of the operational details.
There are some in the House of Commons, one party, the Conservative Party, think that there's an on-off switch for climate change somewhere on a wall somewhere, or some fairy dust we can sprinkle on this. There used to be a time when the Conservative Party of Canada believed that hard things were hard, and that, for example, Prime Minister Brian Mulroney helped the world agree to the Montreal Protocol on ozone depletion in 1987, and scientists estimate that by 2070, 2080, the ozone layer should have recovered from decades of abuse. So it will have taken not quite a century, but almost a century. And fighting climate change is not something that's going to be stopped overnight. It's going to take years and years of hard work, something that they're incapable of even understanding. But that's what we're doing. And that's why we're deploying all those measures. And yes, the emissions are at their lowest level in 25 years. We've never seen greenhouse gas emissions in Canada go down unless it was because of a financial crisis, economic recession, or COVID. But now they're going down. They're 8% below the 2005 levels, and they will continue going down. Maybe, I don't want to take too much time, and maybe I can pass it over to you, Mr. Shepherd, to talk about some of the interagency cooperation we have with Alberta, the town of Jasper, and others as well.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd. I'm watching you listen to our conversation, which we are not here to blame you or your staff, or the work you're doing is incredible. We need to know more details, so as we look forward to what next year looks like and the year after that, what are we learning operationally? How further can we support the work that you're doing on behalf of Canadians?
Well, thanks for the opportunity to speak to that. So at our local kind of regional, provincial, and interprovincial level, we were able to operationally have a very tight cooperative relationship. Sorry to hear that wasn't getting communicated out because it really meant a lot to have the support from British Columbia and Alberta, just like we supported them in some of their really hard years in 2021 in BC and last year in the Northwest Territories and Alberta, and again this year in Alberta. And we're going to have to keep doing that, and it is it is functioning and working.
So, it was mentioned earlier that the budget had money in it. The budget was passed in the spring. The budget then has to be implemented. People have to be hired. Equipment has to be purchased. Where are we at in that process of investing? And we've got the fall economic statement coming up. We've got another budget coming up. So I think it's a good time to talk about what progress are we seeing in terms of implementing the budget, and what do we need to look at for next year?
You have about 30 seconds, but...
And so maybe I could respond to that, Mr. Chair, is just around a couple of things. Is one, we began the implementation because we have had a long train of funding that we have put in place in Jasper. So we have had a long train of how to get prepared, how to get those resources on the ground. I think, one of the things that we always have is how do we get people trained all across the country. We've put in new programs in place in order to be able to do that training. We have new centers just in Banff that we have invested in. As far as having more equipment, there is more equipment, as I was saying, high-powered sprinkler systems that were protected in the town of Jasper.
Thanks.
There have been lots of implementation efforts made.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Pour 2 minutes et demie, Monsieur le Président.
Exact.
For 2.5 minutes, Chair? Okay. Thank you, first of all, for being here. I think especially for you, Mr. Shepherd, and I don't know if you were on the ground, Mr. Campbell, as well, but, well, I remember hearing from one firefighter who was at Lac Mégantic. He said that years later he could see the scenes before his eyes. It was almost like he had PTSD. And I imagine that this might have happened to you, Mr. Shepherd, to see a city burn down, a city as beautiful as Jasper. You have all my sympathies. Thank you for being here today to speak about your experiences. Minister, of course, I would like to talk with you about climate change and the federal government's strategy to fight climate change. Jasper burned down. What will be the next town? Who will be next? What park will burn down next? In July 2023, you said that the federal government strategy has 3 stages. The first would be to suspend Canada's support for fossil fuels, then look at ineffective use of fuels, and then in 2024 you plan to gradually phase out public funding for fossil fuels in Canada. Well, it's 2024, fall 2024. When will we be able to see the plan that you promised, and when will we get to the 3rd stage? You're right, there are 3 stages. In 2022, we were going to look at international funding. Then we were going to look at ineffective subsidies along with the NDP, and under the 3rd stage, we were going to look at public funding generally. And we said that we would get this done by the end of 2024. We're not at the end of 2024 yet. We are working with various agencies to put in place our strategy. I will note that we are the only G20 country that has agreed to remove fossil fuel subsidies. No other G20 country has done this. But, Minister, you've talked about ineffective subsidies, and I'm not sure if I believe you. We know that your government has invested in fossil fuels, and this has added to climate change. And climate change is at the heart of what leads to forest fires. If you continue giving money to the fossil fuels industry, all the other industries will have to clean up the mess. I'm sorry, you've gone far above your 2.5-minute limit. Perhaps Ms. McPherson would like to ask the minister to answer Ms. Bose's question. We tend to do this at committee, but at any rate, you have the floor now, Ms. McPherson.
Those of us with 2.5 minutes, of course. So I'm going to ask some very, very quick questions. First of all, since I have you here, Minister, you will know that one of the biggest threats to the Rocky Mountains right now is coal mining. It was in your mandate letter that you would stop thermal coal exportation, and that has not happened. In fact, it has increased. It is a risk for the people of Jasper and for all of Albertans, and should be for all Canadians. Can you explain why that hasn't been done? Why none of those steps have been taken? Why none of the alignment on in protecting waterways from selenium has happened?
Well, you will know that we are the government that has legislated to phase out the production of electricity through coal. That was us that did that.
Well, it was actually Rachel Notley that started that process from the Alberta NTP.
Actually, in all fairness, Ontario started a long time before Alberta did. I'm from Quebec, so I'm not taking sides here. And second, our commitment for the export phase out is by 2030. So we're working on it. We're in 2024. We still have some time ahead of us.
So your plan is to continue to just increase the exportation of thermal coal through until we have 2030. So that's our strategy, is it?
Our plan is as committed to phase it out by 2030.
You would want to start decreasing that. But anyway, I'm going to go on to the next question. As I mentioned earlier, Danielle Smith the Conservative government in Alberta has cut firefighting supports by $30 million. Did the federal government have to contribute in order to make up for that shortfall? And what was the cost of that?
Well, as you rightly pointed out earlier, I've stated some of the amounts of money we've invested. Obviously, it is the federal government can and should do a lot on that, but we can't do it all. And it's important for provincial governments and territorial governments to step up to the plate as well. And it is sad to see some governments not doing that.
Well, and one of my concerns, of course, is we know that the government of Alberta has failed to support the firefighting initiatives in our province. They've also failed to spend the money on cleaning up wells. They've also failed to protect the mountains from coal mining. What's the federal government's role when the provincial government fails to do anything possible to protect the environment in one of the provinces of this country?
We're doing a lot. In fact, I don't think you could find a time in our history when so many different measures have been deployed to protect the environment, to fight for climate change, to increase conservation in this country.
Certainly lots of announcements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go now to Mr. Calkins. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you very much, Chair. Minister, you were asked earlier a very specific question by my colleague, Mr. Soroka, about when you were first briefed. When were you briefed about the gravity of the situation of the potential for a catastrophic fire in Jasper National Park, including the Jasper town site? When? I want a date, Minister. This is something that would stick in the memory of somebody if you were about to lose, a heritage site park. You would know when you had that conversation. When were you briefed?
En fait, j'ai commencé à recevoir.
I started receiving briefing notes, and again, as I noted, I spoke to the mayor of Jasper even before the situation deteriorated. I don't have the dates before me, but I can certainly provide them. I don't have my day planner with me, but I did have conversations with Parks Canada representatives even before people were evacuated, as I noted.
After you with the mayor and after you had those conversations, did you direct your staff at Parks Canada to accelerate their fire preparedness for Jasper? Yes or no?
Vous savez, je ne sais pas comment vous envisagez le travail de...
I don't know how you imagine a minister's job works. And I don't know if you'll understand my answer, but it is not the minister's job to micromanage 4,000 Parks Canada employees and tell them how to do their jobs. I'm not a forest fire expert.
It comes from the top, Minister. The tone comes from the top.
Hey, please,
the tone comes from the top, Minister. I know very well how it works, Minister, because while you were planning your next escapade to jump off of the CN Tower
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
on the Premier's house, I was
Point of order,
actually
Mr. Chair.
in Jasper National
I'm
Park.
stopping the time.
I was there on the ground.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
I'm stopping the time. I mean, this is going south.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Vancouver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Conservatives do not own outrage and anger at what happened this summer. And for the Conservatives to come here and berate the minister
I don't
in
want
this
to get into
fashion is disrespectful,
No,
particularly,
no,
if I could finish, particularly because we have Mr. Shepherd here.
Mr. Vancouver, I don't care what the debate is, who's saying what, really. I just want to keep it, civil and
respectful, on topic.
Well, yes, but we sometimes go off topic, but I just, if the minister's asked the question, I would like him to have the chance to respond and succinctly, and I found the tone was getting a little too aggressive, Mr. Calkins, to be honest with you. But anyway, well, let's start again. Well, we could debate that till the cows come home, I'm sure. But let's start over. We're not going to start over. We're going to resume the clock, and we'll see how it goes. Okay.
Indication, Minister, that Parks Canada has changed or significantly changed its fire preparedness policy in any way, shape, or form with the matter of prescribed burns in order for fire prevention. When I was a warden in Jasper, and that's what I did in the 90s when I worked for Alberta Parks and National Parks Canada, I could see what was happening with the parks policy. I could see the removal of the roads for fire suppression, and the policy has shifted, and it hasn't changed one bit. The pine beetle comes along, it changes the entire landscape. You have the ability, Minister, to change the policy, set the direction, and set the tone. You had the Excelsior fire in 2015. Residents were worried. They came together. Experts from BC came. All the work that was done in collaboration with the government of Alberta. Everybody said they weren't ready. The fire chief in Jasper National Park was asking for more trailers for sprinklers. They were asking to update the water systems. They were asking the residents, 200 of them came to a town hall in the fire hall, asking to remove that deadfall. You claim that you've spent millions and millions of dollars and you've only removed a couple of hectares of this stuff. This is dead standing pine. It's the driest, most easily burnable, hot burning wood that there is. And you've done nothing. There is nothing here. But I do have this. I have from Jonah Mitchell a response to Melanie Kwong at Parks Canada that says, at what point do we make the organizational decision to cancel planned prescribed burns in Western Canada as more and more media articles raise public concern, public and political perception may become more important than actual prescription windows? This is what your organization is doing, and you're not giving them the direction, and that lies with you, Minister. You're responsible for that. When are you going to take responsibility for the $1 billion of damage that happened in Jasper? Everybody knew this was coming. Everybody knew it, and you were told. And yet here we are, $1 billion worth of assets burned down, and our beautiful Jasper National Park, where I used to work, is laying in ruins. Why don't we give the
minister a chance to provide some answers?
Il y a beaucoup de choses qui ont changé depuis.
One, lots has changed since you worked at Parks Canada. You spoke about the 1980s. A great deal was done since the 80s. You spoke about a sprinkler system, and my colleague spoke about the investments that led to this system. You spoke about wood that needed to be removed. We carried out the removal through both prescribed burns and manual removal. I am the first to recognize that we need to do more to protect ourselves against climate change. Unlike the Conservatives, who bury their heads in the ground and say that climate change doesn't exist and has no impact in Canada.
Left, Mr. Calkins.
What have you got to say about this memo? Why are the prescribed burns, and why are your staff talking about canceling fire prescribed burns for the sake of media optics? Has this ever been brought to your attention, Minister?
So yeah, as both those employees work directly for me, I'd love to take this question in the fact that what they were doing was looking at the difference between prescribed burns and mechanical removal. So we're communities. We had just had the mayor of Fort Smith and their council talk to us and say they weren't comfortable with prescribed burns. We just had Banff talk to us that they weren't happy with prescribed burns. We had articles coming out all across the country. So two of my managers, which is, I think, a good thing for people to do, is to look at different options that they have. Two of them were saying, do we do prescribed burns or do we do mechanical removal? It was not that there would be doing nothing. It was the choice between mechanical removal or prescribed burns. You can take things out of context, which they have been, but that was what the conversation was about.
I will go now to Ms. Taylor-Roy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you to the witnesses for being here, to the Minister, Parks Canada, and especially Mr. Shepherd for being here from being on the ground and helping to fight this. And I think I'd like to direct my questions to you because there's been a lot of accusations thrown around, a lot of negativity concerning what happened. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the cooperation on the ground and how you and the individuals actually there fighting these fires felt about what had happened, what you were able to do, and the level of preparedness when you came in.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, very, very happy to talk about some of the things that did go very well with respect to the Jasper fire. And it started with the safe evacuation of about 20,000 people in a very short period of time. And that was conducted by a community that is only 5,000 residents itself, and we were able to safely get that many people out of harm's way, and it helped us to prepare for being able to manage the fire and protect critical infrastructure and 70% of the town, which my team and I are incredibly proud of being able to pull off with a fire that was, as I said, unprecedented. The problem with that term is that all of the fires that I've been going to in the last 5 years in British Columbia, in the Northwest Territories, in Alberta, are all unprecedented for those areas, and our jobs are getting harder. And I do want to take the opportunity to shout out that I certainly do enjoy working with a lot of different specialists, because I don't approach fire or these levels of events or landscape management with a sense of ego, like I've got everything figured out. And it really is important to rely on other specialists and other experts. I know that some professional foresters were referred to earlier. We actually do go to a lot of professional foresters for assistance with wildfire risk reduction work, and we do collaborate with them. We didn't collaborate with those two individuals who obviously were very interested in offering their services, but we do work with a lot of specialists all the time.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd. I appreciate that. And it's good to hear the level of collaboration on the ground, because a lot of this has gotten very political and trying to score points. And it's interesting to hear Mr. Calkin talk about the fact that everybody knew this was coming. And clearly we see the increased investment that was made by the federal government, as the minister referred to, $86 million versus, I think, a few $1 million that had been made previously by the previous government. But also, why do you think the provincial government decided to reduce spending on firefighting when it seems that everyone knew that this was coming?
Thank you for the question. I don't think we want to put Mr. Shepherd in a position to answer this question. So,
okay, thank you.
Frankly, I can't speak on behalf of the Alberta government, but the fact is that all of levels of government, whether they're municipal, provincial, territorial, federal, will need to invest more in adaptation and helping us prepare to climate change. Federally, it's about $10 billion that has been invested since 2015. Sounds like a lot. It's obviously a lot of money, but the reality is that we will need to invest even more to help Canadians and our communities be better prepared to face the impacts of climate change.
Thank you. And while the need for dollars being spent in adaptation is clear, we clearly also need to continue with investments in mitigating the increase in these extreme events. And it seems to be getting that there's more opposition to the programs that we put in place to try and mitigate some of the increase in the buildup of greenhouse gases and therefore the climate change we're seeing.
Yeah, I'm going to have to stop you there, Ms. Taylor-Roy. We're almost at the
thank
end.
you.
Yeah, we have only a few minutes left. The notice says we end at 6:30, but Mr. Morris has asked if he can get unanimous consent to have 5 minutes. We're okay on this side?
No.
No. Okay,
No.
we don't have unanimous consent, Mr. Morris. I'm
But we
sorry.
are going to 6:30, right? So we'll have another round?
No, we don't have another round. We have 5 minutes left. We can't have another round.
2 minutes, please.
Pardon?
2 minutes each. The longer we
Well,
talk.
perhaps I could finish then what I was saying.
Well, no, that 5 minutes is up. Sorry,
Oh, okay, fine.
I mean,
We got,
round of 6 people when there's 5 minutes left. I mean, that's my sense as chair. I don't see it.
well, we were just willing to give, if we, no. Why would we give up our turn? I'm sure we have, as opposition, lots of questions.
There's really, practically speaking, there's no time for another 6-member round of questioning. So what the option is, we stop now, or we give Mr. Morris, 5 minutes to ask a couple of questions, But we don't have
No.
unanimous consent for that, so I'm just going to stop the meeting now.